The Baltimore Ravens have work to do on their offensive line, and Eric DeCosta opens up on what his strategy could be.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the number one sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. We have 5 days a week, plus more daily Ravens coverage 2 times a day now, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time, talking Ravens football. Thanks to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We're going to talk about a lot today. On today's show, Eric DeCosta did an interview, and he hinted at potential offensive line strategy for this team and a potential solution that they have already on the roster. He also talked about Linderbaum. We'll also dive into in the second part of the show, him opening up on the roster. He had a lot of praise for what's already in the building. Then we'll dive into just some general Ravens notes as well. Thanks again to everybody for being here. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Here to talk about everything with me today, it is from the Ravens Talk podcast and the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, Sam Njoku. And Sam, there's a lot going on with this team right now. We're kind of done with the coaching stuff. We can set that aside. Now we're turning our attention to free agency. Lots of speculation about who stays, who goes, who's coming in. It's all going to creep up pretty. It already is, honestly, creeping up pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, it's creeping up. I'm very excited. I'm trying to get as much information as I can about what the Ravens could be possibly thinking or doing, or their strategy in terms of helping this roster get back to where it was. So it's an interesting time. If you're a Ravens fan, I'm sure you're on pins and needles, as some of your fan favorites could be potentially looking elsewhere for work in 2026.
Yeah, lots of moving parts, lots of moving pieces. And obviously the man at the helm of that is Eric DeCosta, and he did an interview on the Inner Circle podcast, and Aaron Donald, a part of this. And he talked for about 30-ish minutes about just his strategies and what he's looking forward to and kind of how he operates and how this Ravens team operates. And one of the big things that everyone's talking about is the offensive line in Baltimore, Sam. We all know that, especially after how the last year went in Baltimore. And we'll get to what he said about Linderbaum in just a second. But I want to start here because he talked a lot about, the fact that they have 2 good tackles. And he mentioned Linderbaum, but said that they had to augment the guard position. He had belief that young guys are going to make big jumps. But he said, quote, Emery Jones, we feel really strongly about as being a guy that's going to come in and win a spot for us. So that's something where, a lot of people say, we're talking about, all right, get 2 new guards on the roster to start, get a vet in there, maybe draft somebody in the first round, and you have 2 new starting guards. Emery Jones is a guy that a lot of people might not be looking at right now because he was on the roster for the horrific offensive line season, but he wasn't really a part of it. I mean, he didn't really get a lot of opportunities. I wish he would have gotten more opportunities, but a certain coach didn't want that to happen, so it didn't happen. Now he has an opportunity, in my opinion, Sam, with, again, the shoulder stuff behind him, the labrum stuff behind him, full NFL offseason. How big of a factor do you think Emery Jones could be for this Ravens team next season? And do you think he has a legitimate shot to win a starting job next year?
He does have a legitimate shot at winning it. I just don't want it to be one of those things where we're hearing, oh, it's Emery Jones' job to lose. Oh, no, you better go in there and earn it. That spot specifically, well, I won't say specifically because the right guard spot may have been a little bit more in terms of how putrid it was in terms of play. But that spot was very concerning for the Ravens this last season. And to bring in a rookie, well, now second-year player to come in here and just automatically earn the spot without having to fight for it is a little unnerving. Again, we were all pushing for Emery Jones to get more playing time. We're all pushing to see him on the field more. And the Ravens brought him up in a high pick in the last year's draft. So he does have that, stature as being a guy that should win the job. But a lot of things should have happened last year that didn't happen. I would love to see them bring in a guy, somebody that we can, see fight for that spot alongside Emery Jones, and he gets it. But my belief is probably similar to what Eric DeCosta believes. I think that Emery Jones is probably the best guy for the job, but he needs to go out there and prove it. None of this handing people the job and them suffering the consequences for it. Go out there, prove that you're the guy, and earn the job.
Get as many options as he can in the building. Have them all compete for the job, and may the best man win. May the best guy win for that job. That's what everybody wanted to see last year, to your point, Sam, and it didn't happen. Now I think, again, I find it very hard to believe that Eric DeCosta will make that mistake again. It was a mistake last season for that to happen. And I think that he has learned from that, and hopefully it will be different this season. If it's a situation where it's, you get like a solid guy in at one of those spots, right guard. You get a solid guy in there, that's 100% your guy, no competition. He's like a veteran starter, big money guy. Boom, there's one spot. I'm okay with the other spot. If you want to put a second or third round draft pick, Emery Jones, Andrew Voorhees, and maybe a couple other guys in the competition for that job. If, you want to spend your other money on edge rushers or, wide receiver in the first round or whatever other possibilities there are, I'd be cool with an all-out competition for that left guard spot, assuming, again, that guy earns it. So that's a really big factor. But the worry for a lot of people, Sam, is that, you're already probably going to have an overhaul at that guard's position, both right guard and left guard. If you lose Tyler Linderbaum, you're all of a sudden looking at maybe an entirely new interior, 3 new guys, which, again, guard spots, I think you need it. But Tyler Linderbaum obviously has established himself as one of the best centers in the NFL. Now, he's not a perfect player, obviously, but he's a guy that means a lot to the Ravens, and you would have to feel pretty good about his replacement to let him walk out the door. Now, there is context to that, as Linderbaum obviously wants a lot of money, and rightfully so. Eric DeCosta talked about Linderbaum and said that, essentially they want him back. That's something that the Ravens feel strongly about. Where are you with the Linderbaum conversation? I feel like it's honestly shifted, Sam, in a lot of different ways over the last couple of days about, people with, all right, if the money gets to a certain point, it's not even worth bringing him back, which I also agree with. But I think it still would be a pretty big disaster if they let Linderbaum walk. But again, you also just can't afford to pay him probably $24-25 million. If it gets that high, if a bunch of teams start bidding for him.
Yeah, my stance has been the same throughout, and it continues to be the case. I believe that he is going to eclipse $20 million a year for sure. I think if it was $19 million that he was looking for, the Ravens would have already signed him. I believe he's looking for upwards of $20 to $21 million. And I think if he eclipses that $21 million mark, it's not worth it. I think that you move on if you're the Ravens. And I think that's the Ravens mindset coming into free agency. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, man, well, what do the Ravens do in that regard? There is that. I mean, that, as you mentioned, creates a huge hole in the interior of your offensive line. You got an unproven rookie or second-year player at left guard. You got a huge hole at right guard, and then you have a hole at center. So I see the notion that the Ravens should do their best to retain him, but you can't overpay for a center, especially when you have uncertainty at the quarterback position with the cap. You have big-time money you got to throw at Zay Flowers soon, looking for an edge rusher. It's going to cost money, especially if it's a premier player. Can't really waste it. Well, I won't say waste, but can't really spend that type of premium money on a center, especially when the top paid guy at $18 million a year is a better center than Tyler Linderbaum. I understand that the market is dictated to which probably should be getting paid about $20 million, but the bidding war is going to start coming. And then that number is going to creep up to 21, 21 and a half, 22 million. And I'm not sure if the Ravens are willing to spend that money, even though Tyler Linderbaum was the first round draft pick and widely considered to be one of the best centers in football.
Yeah, the quote from DeCosta is, "We've got some work to do on Tyler Linderbaum's contract. We strongly hope to have him back." So there's a stance right there. No words minced. I mean, Kika said, "Oh, we'll see what happens, see how the market plays out." No, they want him back, and rightfully so. So I'm hoping that the Ravens can get a deal done there. But what about the tackle spot, Sam? Where are you with them? Obviously, Roger Rosengarten had a bit of a rough spell at times for the Ravens last season, hitting kind of a sophomore slump. Ronnie Stanley, there's a curious situation with him of how much he has left in the tank and, what's his health situation. Obviously, people still worry about the ankle stuff as it's popped up a couple of times. The tackle spots in terms of do you have to bring anybody in for those spots? No, you have Stanley and Rosengarten. But how well set up do you feel like Baltimore is, and do they have to maybe start looking at a Stanley replacement sooner rather than later in your eyes?
Yeah, they got to start looking soon. If not this year, then next year for sure. I'm not 100% sold on Rosengarten either, but you got to remember, the entire offensive line struggled last year from top to bottom, from 1 to 5, whatever you want to look at it. The entire offensive line regressed significantly. I thought that Rosengarten would take that next step after a pretty solid rookie campaign. That wasn't the case. Ronnie Stanley had a great year in 2024, 25, not so much. But again, the interior of that offensive line was so terrible that the offensive line was really trying to make up for it in certain instances, trying to move guys around, trying to move the play the field to the left to help out with Ronnie Stanley being that strong anchor at the left side of the line. But regardless, I think they do need to bring in either some talent or a young guy to groom to replace Ronnie Stanley for sure. Because in my opinion, the initial thought was that Rosengarten would shift to left tackle once Ronnie Stanley was done. But because he hasn't really shown too much in recent, I guess a year and some change, he had a early start in his rookie year where it was pretty average, and then the end of the 2024 campaign was fantastic. But the 2025 year, not so much. I would love to see them bringing some talent, some youth to kind of shore up that spot.
Yeah, there needs to be some work done. Tackle spots, you're okay for now, but if you address that interior, I think you're going to be okay, at least for this season, but you got to get the right guys in the building. Coming up in the second part of the show, continue talking about what Eric DeCosta had to say about the roster as well as the coaching search that resulted in Jesse Minter. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future. Automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Sam Njoku still here with you talking Ravens football. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage of Locked On Ravens. We have, of course, the regular show here Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time, but we're now twice a day on Locked On Ravens. We also have what I think I'm going to end up calling Locked On Ravens PM at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We have that every single day as well. So twice daily for you on Locked On Ravens. And that's on top of everything else we have for you. Bonus episodes on the weekends on their headlines, instant reaction shows, watch-alongs during games during the year, Locked On Ravens squad show with Sam and I, along with Kadir Ismail. That's Mondays and Wednesdays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And you got the Everyday Club now on Locked On Ravens, where it's extra add-on content. So weekly Q&As, one-on-one text conversation with me, access to a Discord server, ad-free episodes, etc., etc. Sam, one of the big things that I took away from Eric DeCosta going on the podcast with Aaron Donald and the Inner Circle and doing the interview is that he feels really confident in the guys that are on the roster right now. And that's essentially what his message was. He said that he believes in his players and they have a lot of good players coming back. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to run it back with the exact same roster, obviously, but he mentioned a lot of guys, and particularly when talking about a couple of players, because he was going through like names, Travis Jones, losing now to Medibike hurt. He was talking about the secondary, guys like Kyle Hamilton, Nate Wiggins, etc. But he mentioned by name both Roquan Smith and Marlon Humphrey, 2 guys that a lot of people have speculated could be off the team because you can save a decent amount of salary cap space, a little bit there if you do release them. He said, quote, "Of course we got Roquan." Then later said, "Of course, Marlon Humphrey's a great player for us too." So they could free up about $7-ish million in cap space with each of those guys. But, with DeCosta mentioning those guys, maybe feels like, oh, well, would he mention them if they weren't in the plans or not? What's your take on Roquan and Marlon right now? Because we know Eric DeCosta loves throwing out smoke screens too, and he could just say that today just to cut him tomorrow.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into it. I do believe both will be back. At least Roquan, I think, will return in 2026. I just think that, they could take a pay cut, as Q has mentioned on our Locked On Ravens squad show. I think that might be the way to go. I wonder if Roquan will be up for that. Same with Marlon Humphrey. I think Marlon Humphrey may be more, inclined to take that pay cut to stay on the team, or he may just say, hey, it's time for a change. Let's go somewhere else. I think it will depend on what they hear from Jesse Minter and Anthony Weaver about where this team is on defense, what their plan is to make the most out of their opportunity, because it was very clear, especially when we saw Odafe Oweh have success in LA after being traded, that whatever was going on with this defense, they were not being put in the best position to make plays. So it may be a case, as Eric DeCosta probably is alluding to, that it wasn't really the players that were the reason for the fault of this defense. It was that they didn't have proper coaching, proper, alignment, proper collaboration between the coach and players, whatever you want to call it. They seem pretty confident with those guys. I'm in the realm that give these guys one more chance. Maybe if it doesn't work out this year, you cut them, you trade them, you do what you have to do. But I think at least Roquan Smith returns. Marlon Humphrey, probably 60-40, 70-30 that he returns, but I think he has a good chance to be back as well.
Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen maybe back together again. Who knows? It's a PQ. I think PQ's getting cut. I think, yeah. Well, all right. We're bringing in PQ. We're bringing in Jalen Waddle. We're bringing back. I don't even know who else. There are so many former Ray. You know what? Just for the fun of it, why don't we bring back Brandon Stevens? Why don't we just do it? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Although, hey, Brandon Stevens had a decent year in New York. All right, he actually stepped up at times for the Jets last season. But I think, Sam, you asked me a similar type of thing on the squad show on Wednesday, because Eric DeCosta talked about some of the pass rushers. And he mentioned that, he said, quote, I think we have to do a better job of getting after the quarterback for sure. Mentioned a lot of the young guys, said that he has confidence in the young players. Obviously, those include Mike Green and Aeneas Peebles and some of those other guys as well. I still think, as I answered your question on the squad show, they need to bring in some more guys. But how big of a leap can some of those guys from the 2025 draft class take? Because I think year two can be a really big stepping stone for a lot of players, particularly in the pass rushing department. I think we all know that Mike Green and Aeneas Peebles have some talent, but life would just be so much easier. Even if we take Nambi out of the equation, and obviously I hope he's back next year, but even if we take him out of the equation, if you sign like one solid veteran edge guy, it makes life so much easier if you can get that breakout season from even just one of Mike Green and Aeneas Peebles, and they really step up onto the scene.
Yeah, I'm in the belief that it's going to be Mike Green that takes the next step. Again, very similar to the situation with Odafe Oweh, where I feel like they were doing a little bit too much with Mike Green. But I will also say they were in a bit of a pinch. There was some injuries, a lot of guys rotating in and out. And Kavanaugh was doing a lot more than he typically would. I think that's one of the reasons they brought Draymond Jones in. And I think later in the year, where you saw Draymond Jones taking some of that, the roles that you would typically see from a run stuffer, an edge setter, those things were alleviated from Mike Green, and he was able to get to the quarterback more. So I think he'll take the next step, get a little bigger, get more acclimated to the NFL. I try to pretty much leave the rookie season out of it in terms of what I expect from them. I'll just look for flashes here and there, but I think this will be a big step for both Peebles and Mike Green. But if I had to choose which one takes that next step, I think it will be Mike Green. I'm not sure if Peebles is a 3-down player yet because of his size. I think that may be something that Eric DeCosta considers with this upcoming draft or free agency, who they bring in to kind of help supplant Travis Jones or help with the tandem of Travis Jones and what used to be Nnamdi Madubuike.
Right. I'm really excited to see what Mike Green does in year two. I mean, I still believe in him. I think he can make a really big impact. And, guys like Tavius Robinson still on the team. We'll see if they decide to bring back a Draymond or a Kyle Van Noy, but getting some of that pass rush help in, hopefully through free agency, maybe a star in the draft, that's going to be a really big deal for them moving forward. Now, one of the things that Eric DeCosta did mention is, with the combine and the draft coming up, there have been some things that, when plans don't work out sometimes, and that's always going to happen in the NFL, Sam, especially with these younger players. He's pointed to, or he did in this interview, point to 3 things: injuries, off-field character, and not learning the game very well. Eric DeCosta's had an interesting draft experience. I mean, he's had some amazing drafts, and then he's also had some drafts that haven't gone so well. I mean, how would you evaluate Eric DeCosta as a GM, as a drafter, compared to some of the stuff that he's done over the course of the last handful of years at the helm of the Ravens draft classes?
I still think he's a top 5 GM. I really like the way Eric DeCosta drafts, and I know that he's not afraid to push for a position group that he's failed with in the past. I think wide receiver is the one that automatically comes to mind. He spent first round draft capital trying to get talent around Lamar Jackson. And I'm still a believer in Rashod Bateman as well. I think that the receivers that I've seen in the draft that are coming up, very similar comp. I'm the top player, Tyson, very similar comp to Rashod Bateman. So you're looking for a receiver that's going to get timing with your quarterback. You already got it in the building with Rashod Bateman. So I think Eric DeCosta takes a lot of flack. I think his approach may have been, and I was kind of pushing back on this a little bit, but I think his approach to the draft may have been kind of coerced or pushed because of what John Harbaugh was looking for. I think Harbaugh might have been in his ear a little bit with what he needed and such. Maybe Harbaugh said, hey, Daniel Faalele is the guy. You don't really need to worry about the offensive line in this upcoming draft. And that may have kind of helped him or pushed him along to make a decision one way or another. I'm not really sure. But what I will say is when he has a chance to hit on a player, he usually hits. Now, he's had some misses here and there. And Ozzie Newsome also has some misses here and there as well. But I think Eric DeCosta overall is a fantastic GM. Maybe he loves the comp picks a little too much. And I'm fearful that this year may be more of the same because it just doesn't seem like they're going to navigate towards the direction of throwing picks away to get guys that are proven. But I still think DeCosta, when it's all said and done, is in the top 5, maybe top 10 run. Maybe he knocks a few pegs because 2025 wasn't really that great of a year for him in terms of bringing in talent in key positions where we knew the Ravens needed help, which is the interior of that defensive line and interior of the offensive line. We talked about it ad nauseum last year. No go, and the Ravens paid the price.
Yeah, you make a good point. I'll never forget in the, 2020 draft when John Harbaugh was in his virtual, I think he was just in his house and they picked Duvernay and he was like, yes, it was like they had just drafted Justin Jefferson or something. Right. And he was just, yeah. So we don't know how much influence John Harbaugh had in the draft room, how much of it was Eric DeCosta. So I'm curious to see the dynamic between DeCosta, Minter, everybody involved in that process. So it's going to be interesting. But one of the things that I really kind of caught my attention, Sam, honestly, was about the coaching search. And, he talked about how they had some great candidates and mentioned that during the process they had 5 finalists. But in the end, given the rules, they were only able to interview 3 of those 5 finalists. And, of course, for the teams that were in the conference championship and in the Super Bowl, there are specific rules about when guys can talk or go in person for certain interviews. So we know that the Ravens held those 3 interviews. It was Minter, Brady, and do you remember the last one, Sam? It's slipping my mind.
Weaver, I believe. Right?
Weaver was the set final. Okay, so those 3, everybody's been trying to piece together. All right, well, who are these other 2 finalists? Was it Shieldhouse from Los Angeles? Was Kubiak one of those guys? We had talked about Davis Webb before. Who do you maybe speculate that those 2 other finalists were? Because if it's 5 finalists and there were 3 guys interviewed, you got to eliminate at least 1 or 2 really good quality candidates that were still in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to figure out who the last 2 finalists were. It's kind of a moot point at this point, obviously, but I think if I'm not mistaken, I'm hearing that Webb was potentially most likely going to be a finalist and that it was going to be an LA Rams guy. Now, I don't know who it was going to be, Shieldhouse or Shula, I should say, or whoever, but that makes me wonder if Clint Kubiak was one of those 5. I always thought it was going to be 6 finalists because I felt like, Shula, Webb, and Clint Kubiak were very much in the thick of it for the job, but it looked like Eric DeCosta confirmed it was 5 guys, so that would lead me to believe that Webb was one, and then either a Rams guy or Clint Kubiak was the other guy for the finalist spot.
There's been a lot made about the whole Kubiak situation and whether that would have been the right. I mean, look, I think they hit it out of the park with Minter and everything that he's been able to do with his staff. But I know a lot of people wanted Kubiak. I was, again, Kubiak and Minter were 1A and 1B for me. And I think that, again, I would have been cool with either one of them. And I think the way that Minter has built his staff, I'm okay with it. I'm not sure how Kubiak would have built his staff. All right. It'll be different for both guys, but it was kind of cool to get that insight from Eric DeCosta on the situation. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk a little bit just about some Ravens notes. Isaiah likely had some comments we talked about yesterday that I want to get Sam's opinion on. And we'll talk about that and a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which just might be sleepers. The board is set. The flavors are ready, and only one is going to take the top spot. 5 Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors and some for everyone. 5 Hour Energy shots give you a boost with zero sugar, and 5 Hour Energy has a lot of upcoming flavor innovations planned. And for me, I'd love to see a star fruit flavor get made. I grew up loving star fruit, and I think that'd be a really awesome flavor. And for me, the flavor I'm drafting at number 1 is cherry, because you got that bright, punchy taste, and it's super smooth and easy to recognize as well. But a sleeper flavor for me is the cotton candy, because you get that light, airy candy profile. Plus, there's that pure sweetness involved from start to finish with the cotton candy. Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, still rocking out with you here on this Purple Friday. I can't wait till we have actual Purple Fridays again. The Ravens are playing some football, but we have a long way to go and a lot of roster decisions and changes this Ravens team is going to go through before we get to that point. Thanks again for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. Sam, Isaiah Likely, he had some comments. I mentioned this on the Locked On Ravens PM show that we did yesterday. We went over those comments, but I want to get your thoughts on them because, you know, if you didn't think Isaiah Likely was out the door before, he essentially didn't confirm it, but I mean, you can tell based off what he said that, yeah, it might not be looking so good for Isaiah Likely in Baltimore. Now, he was on with John Gruden, and this interview was released, I believe it was yesterday, but it happened during the Super Bowl, I believe. He was asked by Gruden about like what's going on with the agent, you know, what are you sitting down talking about? And Likely said, quote, I just want to be able to blossom. I feel like the last couple of years I've had a great vet in Mark Andrews. He taught me everything to be a star caliber tight end, to the point where it's like now I feel like I just want to be on a team where I can get out there and help a quarterback put up as much points as possible, and a team put up as many points as possible. And he was also asked by Gruden, and I know that you put this clip out about, you know, can they even afford you over there in Baltimore right now? And Isaiah Likely was like, and then he said, quote, I'd say I love Baltimore. They took a chance on me when all 31 didn't. Baltimore's home for me, but at the end of the day, it's a business. I'm going to see what's going to happen. They've got to pay Zay, got to restructure L. Lindy's up. Mark, Bate are paid. And so he just essentially said, hey, I'm going to see what's going to happen. But I think we all understand, Sam, that Likely is probably thinking that he wants to be a guy somewhere, like he kind of said in that quote. I think this, if the nail wasn't in the coffin already, I mean, it's about as hammered in as it can get it right now with these comments.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would think Isaiah Likely was going to return after the Mark Andrews signing. I think that was the nail in the coffin. I think you heard kind of his point to say, hey, I want to be the guy. I want to be the guy who's going to be the target to put up points. And right now with Mark Andrews taking away targets from Isaiah Likely. So I think that's his mindset, as well as payment. I think that, you know, the Ravens have tried for months to get Isaiah Likely on the contract before they pivoted to Mark Andrews. So it's not just that Isaiah Likely is not joining the Ravens because, you know, the Ravens didn't want to pay him. The Ravens tried to pay Isaiah Likely first, and then when that didn't work, they pivoted to Mark Andrews. They didn't want to lose all 3 tight ends. They chose Mark Andrews as all reliable. I know a lot of Ravens fans don't like that decision, but the fact is Isaiah Likely is going to be looking at more money than the $13.3 million a year that Mark Andrews is going to get. We're looking at maybe $16-17 million a year for Isaiah Likely, because the bidding war will be that, because Isaiah Likely, as we all know, is a phenomenal talent. Now, should the Ravens have ponied that up? We will never know. I think especially with the John Harbaugh situation, whether or not he had any influence in the fact that, you know, he wanted to prefer Mark Andrews over Isaiah Likely. I don't know. I don't want to put too much on John Harbaugh's players being the reason for it. But at the end of the day, Mark Andrews is the tight end for 3 years at least, and Isaiah Likely saying sayonara.
That seems to be the reality. And yeah, I mean, I've said it over and over, just like you said. The Andrews deal was signed, and then all of a sudden, you know, that was it for Isaiah Likely. It's just not feasible for them, much like Roquan and Patrick Queen, to pay 2 non-premium position players upwards of 10, 12, 13, whatever it is, $1 million per season. But player people aren't talking about enough, in my opinion, Sam. It is another Ravens free agent tight end, and that is Charlie Kolar. He's someone that I think earned himself some money this past year. You know, I don't think it's just going to be he's going to sign a 2-year, $4 million deal and boom, that's it. I mean, you know, when Josh Oliver left the Ravens, he went to Minnesota. He got a 3-year, $23-ish million contract. That surpassed a lot of what people thought Josh Oliver was going to get. I think Charlie Kolar could get maybe in that same range. I think it'd be a disaster to lose both Likely and Kohler this free agency period, Sam. I mean, how important is it that if Likely walks out the door, that they bring back Kohler in this situation?
If you think losing Charlie Kohler is a disaster, you may want to board your windows because a disaster is coming. Charlie Kohler is going to get paid too. And I'm not sure. I think a lot of Ravens fans need to realize that this roster is going to be very different next year as opposed to this past season. I think that this coaching staff kind of made mention to it. They're going to strip down this roster, bare bones, look at every nook and cranny down to the foundation of what this team is and what they want it to be and make changes appropriately. I think there's some players on this team that worked well for the offense that Declan Doyle, that Todd Monken and Greg Roman had that Declan Doyle may not see. Same thing with the defense. Maybe there's something that, Zachary Orr and Mike McDonald saw that, Jesse Minter and Anthony Weaver don't see as a future for this team. So I think Ravens fans will probably be a little, there's going to be some shock and awe in what's going to occur here. I think a lot of players that we think are going to return won't return, and maybe some players that we didn't expect to join the team will join the team because this is going to be a little different than what we're accustomed to for the Ravens. So as far as Charlie Kohler is concerned, I'm not sure he's going to leave. I want to say it's a conclusion. I don't think it's up into the realm of Isaiah Likely in terms of his departure, but I think he's going to be getting a little bit more in terms of looking more so than a lot of people think. So I know he's a fan favorite. I know the Ravens will love to keep two, but I'm not sure that the Ravens are even ready for the bank that Charlie Kohler is going to especially get. If Isaiah Likely is not available, teams are going to be looking for a tight end, and if they're watching the film, they'll see that Charlie's almost as productive as Mark Andrews are given the opportunity.
If there's one saving grace to the tight end position in the Ravens, Sam, is that they seem to always find their guys in the mid round. So, if Likely does leave, I do have confidence in them to go out there and find another guy in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, whatever that might be. But even still, it is going to definitely look a little bit different next offseason, or I guess next season, in terms of what they're going to bring to the table. Is there a free agent that is kind of like your guilty pleasure this offseason where it's like, I want this guy back more than anybody wants this guy back? Is there one? Because for me, it's Ardarius. Well, I mean, I want Ardarius back so bad on this team in 2026. Is there a guy like that for you?
I want Draymond Jones back. I really like what I saw in Draymond this year. I think he's one of those pass rushers that could do the work that Anthony Weaver is talking about. I think he's one of those guys that they asked him to do the dirty work last year. A lot of the dirty work that Nandi Madubuike would do in certain instances and others. They had him switching between interior and edge and back and forth. I think that type of versatility may do wonders for this team. Now, again, people are looking for pass rushers. They're going to see that he had success in Tennessee. Maybe he didn't have quite the amount of sacks that he did at the beginning of the year with the Ravens in this latter portion of the season, but they're going to be looking for pass rushers. They're going to see Draymond Jones. They're going to see a guy that was traded for and, looked after, sought after by the Ravens and maybe make a push. And there's another guy that could be priced out, but I would love to see Draymond Jones back. That's why it's so important for the Ravens to get an extension done with Lamar Jackson sooner rather than later so they can begin formulating a plan to bring back some of these guys that I think they really need in order to be successful next season.
Yep. It's a long road ahead, but it's an exciting one with a lot of new faces potentially coming in, guys who obviously have helped out in years past in Baltimore coming back. So this roster, it's Eric DeCosta and Jesse Minter's art project, and I'm very curious to see how it ends up being painted. But Sam, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on. Before I get you out of here, tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Ravens Talk Podcast. We have a show coming up tomorrow. I think it'll be live streamed actually at 6 o'clock p.m. So make sure you tune in for that. And that might be a regular occurrence throughout the offseason. You can also catch me on the Locked On Ravens Squad show with Kevin and Q. We talk Ravens football twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m.
Boom. Be sure to tune into the live stream, assuming it is live, of course. And then be sure to go support Sam. All the links in the description down below. Sam, I appreciate you again. Thanks so much for hopping on. And thank you to everybody who watched and listened to Locked On Ravens today. Coming up, we'll be back here for Locked On Ravens PM this evening. And then, of course, if there are headlines over the weekend, we'll be back for those. But if not, we'll be back on Monday with our regularly scheduled programming. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.